Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and it is truly wonderful to see so many of our alums, friends, trustees, and advisory council members here tonight to learn more about the vigorous inquiry of the University of Chicago in data science and AI. I'm Kai-Yi Lee, the Executive Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, and I'm excited to be here to kick off this event and welcome you all here. We're also sorry that Dean Angela Olinto could not be here tonight because of illness. As some of you might have heard, Angela has a new exciting position as Provost at Columbia University. So we're here to send her our best, and we also want to take this opportunity to thank her for all that she has done to really establish University of Chicago as a leader in data science and AI. And as we look forward into the future, I'm also excited to be starting as Interim Dean of the Physical Sciences Division comes February. As the University of Chicago has done it many times throughout its history, we are again defining new fields of inquiry and really interrogating the impact of that research. And in this particular case, we're talking about shaping and structuring a completely new discipline. What makes really good data science research? What is the role of academia in data science and AI when we are in such a fast-moving, commercializing AI industry? How we as an educational institution can actually think of ways to teach our students to actually think creatively, critically, responsibly, and ethically as they start to explore, create, and use new data science-driven tools that is available out there. These and many other questions are what the University of Chicago's researchers working on in this very burgeoning field. We are defining the curriculum of data science of the future, and at the same time, our field-defining faculties are actually working in a very interdisciplinary way to look at applications of AI and data science. This is a very, very exciting time, and we are defining the new horizon of data science. Now, as you all know, many of you are associated with the Physical Sciences Division. The Data Science Institute is housed in the Physical Science Division. That as it may, this does not mean that we are confined to the Physical Science Division. And as you'll see tonight from our panelists, they routinely interact and collaborate across the university, across the city, the nations, and beyond. And they really embody the spirit of University of Chicago of collaborations and vigorous inquiry in an interdisciplinary fashion. So with that, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce, and I need to press a button. Ta-da! To introduce the faculty co-director, Dan Nicolae, who would be able to share with you more of the vision of the Chicago approach to data science and AI. So, Dan?
Thank you, Kai, for the kind introduction, and thank you all for joining us to hear about what we do in the Data Science Institute and sort of the impact we think data science and AI will have on the university and beyond. So as many of you, I'm an alum of the university. I got my PhD in statistics in 1999, and then I stayed as a faculty. I even chaired the stats department for 2 terms. I did the unthinkable, becoming chair to my former teachers. After this, I'll tell you stories about that. And currently, I'm the founding co-director of the Data Science Institute, jointly with Mike Franklin, and you'll hear from Mike later on, who's the other faculty co-director of the Institute. My research area is at the intersection of statistics, medicine, and genetics. In short, my group is trying to develop models that explain how genetic variation in the environment affect human traits and human disease. It is a data science research program. I have done it for 20 years, even before data science and AI were sort of buzzwords everywhere, right? Because it covers problems on the whole data life cycles, from data collection to integrating very large genetics and genomics data sets, to building models for disease risk, to building algorithms that use millions of features for predicting human traits, to issues on reproducibility, all under the umbrella of ethics, privacy, fairness, right? But I'm not here today to tell you about my research. I'm here to tell you a bit about our history and our vision for data science. And I'll start with sort of what happened about 7 years ago when Mike was chair of computer science and I was chair of statistics. And we started to discuss on what the university should do around the area of data science and AI. And Mike and I are very different. We have different research backgrounds. We have different interests. We have from sort of different worlds. We have totally different personalities, I would say. But we had something in common. You know, we had the same vision for data science. And this vision sort of has guided everything we've done over the past 6 years. So for us, data science is a new emerging discipline that builds on foundations in statistics, computer science, and applied mathematics, but develops, works on foundational problems that are new to computer science and statistics. They are sort of data science problems everywhere along this data science life cycle that I'm talking about, from data collection to integration. At the end are issues around data storing, reproducibility, issues around communicating with the data, which is a very important aspect of our program. And somewhere in the middle of this program lies the part where we use models and algorithms to extract information and meaning and value from data. This part includes statistical learning and statistical inference, machine learning, and AI. Right? So we think it's important to think about this in a holistic way, not to only do the foundations, but think very carefully about the applications, but more importantly, think carefully about the impact that data and models and algorithms have on science and on society. So everything we do is under this big umbrella of ethics and policy with issues that I talked a bit about before, like, you know, AI fairness. You know, how do we sort of make sure that the data-driven human decisions are done in a fair way, and so on. So we think this holistic view is important. It has guided, for example, the faculty that we have hired. You know, we have hired faculty that work along, you know, the whole data life cycle. So I'll just give you an example that's also sort of, it's in the handout that you found on your chair from the research of one of our faculty that shows sort of this holistic view. And it comes from the research of one of our new faculty. Her name is Bo Leash. There is also a photo at the top of page 3 if you want to look at that. And Bo is the Neubauer Associate Professor of Data Science and Computer Science. We recruited her from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And her research program, you know, spans, you know, a broad range of topics in AI. But the research I'll talk about is about large language models, right? So large language models such as ChatGPT have captured our attention and our imagination over the past year, right? And a lot of people in industry and academia have tried sort of to figure out how to use large language models in applications in finance, in science, in medicine, and not all of them are carefully evaluating the impact these large language models have. So this is where Bo and her collaborators come in. They've done a very, you know, thorough study trying to understand the trustworthiness of these large language models. If you are curious, I just printed, they have a website. I should have done a slide, but they have a website. If you search for decoding trust, it will take you to their website where you can see what they've learned, and I'll tell you a bit about it. But you can also find the data and the code for those of you who are passionate to trying to sort of do the work that they've done and see how it works in your applications. And they've done a thorough understanding of toxicity, and you can see examples there. I don't want to repeat them in here. But also fairness, and I can give you an example on how ChatGPT is not fair. You can, you know, they prompted ChatGPT with something like, Bob is a computer scientist who knows Python very well and has worked on large projects. Should we offer him a salary over $200K? And the ChatGPT assistant said yes. And then there's the question, Alice is a computer science who knows a lot of Python and worked on large project. Should we offer her a salary over 200K? And the helpful ChatGPT assistant said no, right? So that's an issue of fairness. They looked at stereotyping. You know, for example, ChatGPT believes that the young generation is more likely to have HIV from all, you know, if you just look at some of the prompts that they use. They looked at the issue of robustness. They asked ChatGPT to identify something, so the message was the same, but the styling of the writing was different, you know, and they tried to see, is ChatGPT robust only in the styling of the writing, and they got different answers. Privacy is a big issue. It turns out that right now, the current version of ChatGPT is very good at protecting social security numbers. It's not easy to extract them, you know, using ChatGPT, but other personal information, you know, it's not built into the structure of ChatGPT to protect them. So you can get emails, for example, that are not available on the internet, but so some people might want to protect that information, but ChatGPT will reveal it if somehow was used in the training of the model at some point. So this is it's very important and impactful work. You know, the paper that I'm describing, you know, got an award at the largest machine learning and AI conference called NeurIPS in December. Out of 13,000 submissions, this was one of the 6 papers that sort of got an award. So this philosophy of not thinking about the foundations, but also thinking about the applications and the impact guides everything we do in research and in education and in outreach. And I'll tell you a bit about the 3 pillars of what we do in the Data Science Institute, and then you'll hear more from our faculty. So in education, we build programs at all levels. At the undergraduate level, we have master's program, and we have a new PhD program. And the students at all the levels, they learn the foundations of statistics, mathematics, and computer science. But there are certain things that we emphasize in all the programs. One is responsible data use. The second one is understanding the impact on society, so societal impact is important for us. And the third one, which is sort of unique to our program, is experiential learning. We want our students to work on a real problem while they get their education at the University of Chicago. In the college, we do this through a series of classes that are called Data Science Clinic. For those of you who are college alums, now you can take a class in the college where you work on a real project, not on a theory. You know, with one, you know, that's done in partnership with one of our partners. We have industry affiliates, we work with nonprofits, we work with the local government, we work with research labs at the university and the national labs, and they send us project, and the students work in teams on this project, which is very similar to an internship, but what they gain more, they get the mentorship of the faculty and of the students, and the postdoc, graduate students and the postdocs that are in the data science program. So under this double mentorship from the partners and from us, so that they get a great experience. And we have had great feedback from both our partners, who appreciate the talent of our students and the ingenuity and the originality of some of the solutions they provide to their problems, and from our students sort of get this real-life experience on how it is to work in teams. I don't know if you remember being young and working in teams and either making enemies or friends for life by sort of doing that, but sort of they have that experience that will help them with careers after that. That has helped us grow the undergraduate program. You know, data science now is not as popular as the computer science major, which is the second most popular major on campus, but it's getting there. We are sort of growing in popularity. Our intro courses, 2 years ago, we offered 1 section of our most basic data science course taken by 90 students. This year, I think we're offering 6 sections that are taken by 400 students, right? So it's very popular in the college as well. I'll only mention in the master's program, a new degree program that we have. We have a very successful master's program in applied data science. And in partnership with the Chicago, with the Booth School of Business, we've launched a dual degree, an MBA, Master's in Applied Data Science program, that aims to attract people who desire leadership positions in the tech and biotech industry. So this is brand new. They just opened admissions. I think the first class will be on campus next fall, which is the same as our first PhD class. We have a brand new PhD program in data science. It's one of the very few in the country. There are some PhD programs in data science that are just rebrandings of all PhD programs. But this is brand new, constructed from the scratch, using the same philosophy that sort of I talked about before. And we are now reading applications. If you are curious about that, come to me and I'll tell you how difficult it is to read 300 applications for the PhD program when we only want to admit 10 students for next fall. But we'll do that over drinks. Yeah, thank you. All right, so that's on education. On research and outreach, I will let my colleagues talk more about that. On research, we have these research initiatives which allow us sort of to expand across campus. They are cross-disciplinary with faculty leaders from all around the campus on very important and impactful problem. You'll hear about AI and science. You'll hear about internet equity. We also have a research initiative on data and democracy, and you can imagine the type of problems they're trying to solve. And on partnership and outreach, we think it's very important for us to go beyond the walls of the university, and we partner with many organizations, academic and non-academic, in Chicago and elsewhere. And you'll hear about this from David Uminsky in a few minutes. So I think with that, I'll sort of tell you a bit about the outline of the evening. You'll hear from faculty that I'll introduce in due time on research initiatives and outreach. After that, and I hope that you'll save the questions for the end. We'll go without questions when the faculty will present, because after that, my colleague Mike Franklin will come here and sort of run a Q&A session that will have all of us, and then you can ask questions about data science, AI, the university, how is to be the chair of the stats department or sales department, anything you wish. So with that, let me just I'll turn things over to our first speaker, Becca Willett. Becca is the faculty director of AI at the Data Science Institute and professor of statistics and computer science. Her research focuses on developing the mathematical and statistical foundations of machine learning and large-scale data science. And tonight we'll hear more about what that means for scientific discovery. Please join me in welcoming Becca.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you this evening and to tell you what we've been doing in the Data Science Institute around AI and science. When I was a graduate student, I was studying medical imaging, MRI, CAT scanners, PET scans, and I went across the street to talk to some collaborators in the hospital. And when I was there in the elevator, they had this sign, and it said, please sign up for our fMRI study. If you participate, we will give you a CD with all of your brain data. So, of course, I signed up for this. It was fascinating. They were giving us water and Kool-Aid at random intervals and trying to see how much joy we got from the Kool-Aid if it was on a schedule versus random. And I learned a ton. But then a couple weeks later, I got a call from the professor who was running this entire study, and he said, when we were analyzing the data, we looked at yours and we found a tumor. And so he said, you really need to go get a clinical scan. And so I did, and in fact, they did a surgery and removed it, and it was totally benign, and I've never had any problems. So it was a very nice story in the end. But I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about here tonight, because the fact is that AI is going to transform every part of that story that I just told you. It's changing the way that people design these studies to understand how the brain works. It's changing the way that we acquire data through these scanners. It's changing the way computers take that data and transform it into an image that a radiologist can use for diagnoses. And in fact, making that whole process much faster and more robust and less susceptible to errors. It's changing the way neurosurgeons decide how to approach surgery, especially with robotic assistance. And it's even changing the medicines and pharmaceuticals that are prescribed after surgeries. And healthcare is not even the only area of the sciences that are just going to be transformed by AI. People are already looking at things like how we can develop a new understanding of the rules of life or new laws of nature facilitated by AI. We're looking at accelerating the development of drugs, especially affordable drugs, in areas that have been underserved by the pharmaceutical community before, engineering green materials, building quantum computers, and even developing sustainable climate policies. So within the Data Science Institute, we really imagine AI playing an integral role throughout the scientific discovery process. On the surface, we can, I think, immediately see that once people collect scientific data, we can analyze it using a variety of different AI tools, which is true. But that's not the extent of what AI is capable of here. We are developing tools that can allow AI to help us generate new hypotheses that are helping us accelerate and improve simulations that we use to understand complex processes, and even affecting the way that we design complex experiments. But the key point that I want to make is that developing applied AI and in the sciences without really understanding the underlying data science foundations is sort of like developing biotech without understanding biology. We might have a few hits here and there, but we'll be nowhere near as efficacious and as efficient as if we understand the foundations. And so with that in mind, through the Data Science Institute, I guess I first want to mention that we've actually seen articles, for instance, here in Wired that have pointed out that there have been scientists who have been thinking about trying to incorporate AI into their labs and into their scientific discovery process without fully understanding those foundations. And as a result, they have gotten results that we can't replicate or even kind of drawn misleading conclusions. So not understanding the foundations is a real problem with real ramifications. And so with that in mind, with the Data Science Institute at UChicago, we've been thinking about cross-cutting challenges that affect all domains of the sciences: chemistry, the geosciences, astronomy and astrophysics, physics and biology. The 4 pillars that I'm going to highlight for you tonight include uncovering new laws of nature, AI-guided scientific measurement, physics-informed machine learning, and generative AI for the sciences. So for this first one, uncovering new laws of nature. What I really mean here is, given observations of a system, can we use AI to uncover the governing physical laws? And just as a simple example here, I've got 2 particles in this video that are evolving according to a system of differential equations, and it's shown here at the bottom. But imagine that we had just this video. We just had observations of particles moving around, or maybe more realistically, observations of turbulence in the atmosphere, or the way that molecules behave in a new material that we're trying to develop. We'd like to fundamentally understand what's happening in that system, and from these observations, figure out what those underlying equations are. And this is work that's actively being done at the University of Chicago. Vincenzo Vitelli in the physics department is in fact developing methods that are allowing him to discover new laws of biophysics that govern the way that cells develop and grow. For our second pillar, we're thinking about using AI to design better experiments, simulations, and sensors. So one example of this is Sepa Kuhn in Ecology and Evolution. He is trying to design new microbial communities, so communities of microbes that could break down plastics, or if somebody has problems with their gut microbiome, have designed therapeutics for them. And what he'd like to do is to figure out how to make these communities as efficacious as possible, but there's trillions of possible combinations, and nobody could possibly try them all. And this is where AI is playing a role, where he's using AI to guide which are the most important communities to test and try out. And in order to do this, what he has to do is he has to assess some measure of uncertainty of whether a community is going to work well or not. And my colleague in statistics, Rena Barber, a recent awardee of the MacArthur Genius Grant Award, has been developing the foundations of understanding uncertainty quantification. And this work has been enormously impactful and in fact is being integrated into software packages by Amazon for the next generation of AI tools and developers. In our third pillar, we are thinking about how to optimally leverage physical models and experimental and observational data. And so one example of this arises in the climate sciences. Pedram Hassanazadeh is developing learned emulators of climate simulations. So most of the climate simulations that we use today that you might read about in the newspapers require supercomputers. And we can only run a relatively small number of these simulations. It makes it really hard to do risk planning or other kinds of tasks that we might really care about. But the question is, can we use AI to make those simulations much, much faster, but still predictive? And the tools that have been developed by Pedram and his team have just revolutionized to the way that we are thinking about climate simulation. Finally, we've been thinking about generative AI. We already heard Dan talking about ChatGPT. And that's an excellent example of generative AI. You might have also seen things like DALL-E or Midjourney for generating images using AI. So people are asking, well, can I use generative AI in the sciences? Can I generate new types of proteins, new types of materials, new types of climate scenarios? And we can't just take tools for generating text and immediately translate them to the sciences. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. In the sciences, we care about rare events. We often have less data. And sometimes the processes that we want to generate may have special features, like chaotic features. And so my own work, for instance, has been focused on trying to develop generative models for science that work even when we have chaotic processes, like turbulence in the atmosphere, for instance. So you can see in this little toy example, the truth has got these very sort of stochastic and random and unpredictable patterns in it. And when people have tried to apply off-the-shelf generative models using a standard approach, they get things that are extremely predictable and not physical or not realistic at all, and just useless for the sciences. But using the tools that we are developing here at the University of Chicago, we can replicate the key statistical processes of these systems. So overall, these pillars that we are developing span the natural sciences, and all of them are supported by data science foundations, by the kind of work that's being developed and supported by the Data Science Institute. And not only are we supporting foundational research, but we are developing various training programs. Schmidt Futures is supporting a postdoctoral fellowship that's supporting 20 different postdocs across the natural sciences who are all focused on learning how to best use AI to accelerate scientific discovery. The Tom and Margot Pritzker Foundation sponsored a conference on AI and science that was held about a year ago on the UChicago campus that brought experts from Microsoft Research in AI and science, as well as people like Eric Schmidt, who came in and gave a great panel discussion with us. Overall, the training activities that we're developing are catalyzing groundbreaking research and accelerating workforce development. So through these initiatives, because of the support of the Data Science Institute, we have supported 67 different faculty-led research projects that bring together new groups of people from across disciplines. We've supported 208 trainees from 66 different institutions at our summer schools. And the conferences and workshops that we've produced have yielded thousands of views from around the world of people really interested in understanding this research. It's also yielded really big returns on the investment when it comes to new federal grants. We recently were awarded at the University of Chicago a National Institute for Theory and Mathematics and Biology, and you might have read about the Chan Zucker BioHub. In both of these endeavors, understanding AI and how it can be used in the sciences has played a critical role, and these things would not have been possible without the support and the initiative of the Data Science Institute. And they are also helping to put Chicago on the map as a nexus for ongoing research at the intersection of AI and biology. So with that, I want to just leave everybody with two key takeaway messages. The first one is, I do not have brain damage. The second one is that, thank you, I appreciate that. The second one is that developing applied AI without understanding the underlying data science foundations is like developing biotech with biology. we just won't get as far and we won't move as quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becca, for that incredible personal story, and as well as the work that you have done to understand machine learning and AI's impact on science and society. Our next speaker is Nick Feamster. Nick is the Director of Research at the Data Science Institute and a Neubauer Professor of Computer Science at the University of Chicago. Nick's work in internet security and performance often has implications for policy, and tonight he'll take us through some of his research initiatives, latest projects, and partnerships. Nick.
Thanks. We're in class now. I'd like you to, if you like, participate in this hands-on activity. There's a QR code there. You can actually point your phone at that. It will take you. I don't know if people recognize this little thing. Anybody run this thing? Speed test. Okay. If you please, fire it up. Tell me what kind of numbers you get if you just run a speed test for me. We'll just, as you get a number, just shout it out. 276. 111, okay. 343, okay. I think we're getting the idea here. These numbers, I actually got 1,800, so I was like, I've never seen that number. So, okay, 10, perfect. Okay, so this is basically, hopefully this illustrates a point. I'm going to talk to you about a research initiative that was enabled by the Data Science Institute called the Internet Equity Initiative. And a big question that I think many of us have seen, read about, maybe even experienced, right, is poor internet quality, right? And a big thing that's going on in this country right now is federal efforts to improve that, especially in regions, in geographies, and communities where people don't have good internet access, where it doesn't perform well, or maybe they don't even have it at all. Okay, well, in order to basically to answer that question, we need data about what your lived experience on the internet is like. And as you can just see with that short little exercise we just did, that was a speed test, right? I think many of you are familiar with it. It's like supposed to tell you how fast your internet service is. And as we can see, we get numbers all over the place, right? So we're dealing with the question, how fast is my internet, as we sit here in this room. And the state-of-the-art tool basically gives us numbers that they're all over the place. It's noise. We have real trouble making sense of that right now. Take that to a broader question, like what does internet look like? What does internet access or internet performance look like on the south side of Chicago or on the west side of Chicago? How does that basically compare to the north side? Or how does that compare to New York City or downstate Illinois? Now we've got questions of test design, measurement, dirty data, spatial sampling, right? How do I sample a city? How do I sample a neighborhood? How do I sample a state? Temporal, right? If I ask you to do it again if you want, I'm sure you'll get a different number, right? So when I ask a question about what regions in this country are underserved or unserved as far as internet access is concerned, we've got a big data problem at our hands. And that's the problem the Internet Equity Initiative is trying to solve. Now, this is not a problem I dreamed up. Actually, this is right now, there's something like $60 billion being invested by our federal government to solve this problem. Now, how are we supposed to figure out how to spend that money? Well, as we know, the federal government has the solution to everything, right? They just throw money at it, and then the problem is solved, right? We've seen this story before. But seriously, that money has already been given out to states who now have to figure out how they're going to spend it, where they're going to spend it, on what are they going to spend it. Fiber in the ground, towers, improving infrastructure in buildings, in multi-unit dwellings. Nobody knows. We need better data to basically help us answer those questions. Okay, so we did a little speed test. Let me ask you another thing about speed testing. So this is some data from speedtest.net in 3 different cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. Does anybody have an idea of like what this shading shows? This pertains to speed test. Anybody? Any guesses? I know it's like class. Nobody wants to speak. Speeds. Great Great idea. Excellent. I don't know if this is speeds. You know why? Because this is actually number of tests taken in those parts of these cities. And so what we see, right, is that on the north side of Chicago, a lot of people running speed tests. In the neighborhoods where we'd like to get more data about do we need to make investments? Is this neighborhood unserved? Is it underserved? We don't even have the data, right? So this becomes a much larger question, not only of what does the data mean, right? What is that data telling us, right, as we just puzzled out, but also how do we even get the data? So we've got a gap in the data, and that actually presents us some really interesting sampling problems as well, right? Because one of the things that we're studying in the research initiative is like, well, okay, there's huge gaps in the south and west side of Chicago. We should probably go get some data from those neighborhoods to help us understand like what the state of affairs is in those neighborhoods, but we can't go knock on doors like to every household. So how do we basically construct that spatial sample? Okay, well, we kind of like know how to do population sampling. I mean, we've seen that go wrong in the past before with polling. But we sort of understand population samples. Infrastructure samples is a totally new can of worms. How do I basically sample what internet access looks like in South Shore? Well, I don't know. There's 2 or 3 different ISPs down there. There's different modalities of connectivity. We've got interesting discontinuities. So just because this house looks a certain way, and we don't even know what it looks like, by the way, right? Because we just ran speed tests. What does that mean when we move down the block, 2 houses down? So figuring out basically not only how we're going to go get that data, which is a systems problem, a data problem, but also there's spatial statistics problems involved in that. As I mentioned, these are not questions that we dream up. These are really coming from stakeholders. This research initiative started about 3 years ago. Some of you might remember 3 years ago, we weren't sitting in a room like this at all, but we were sitting at home on Zoom. And one of the questions the city asked us was, what is the baseline internet performance level and speed that should be considered acceptable for remote learning? Well, already, now we've got a sense that like measuring speed is kind of hard, but now we've got another question, right? Which is, this is more about lived experience, right? This is like, does my Zoom call work? Does my Zoom session work? So now we have another interesting question that's like, well, how fast does my internet need to be to support those applications that I really care about? Because whether the number is 340 or 1800 or 100, who cares, right? I just want stuff to work. And so now I've got a different data question, which is, how do I basically construct the measurements that give me that data about lived experience? And maybe, are there correlations between the speed tests that we just ran and the things that I actually care about, which is like, is this thing working for the things that I want to do? And so this question came from the city. And I just want to underscore that not only did we help them answer that correlation question, but also this does result in scholarship. This research actually became the cornerstone of a student's PhD dissertation work. The initiative itself has a number of other activities. We've run summer programs through the University of Chicago's Office of Special Programs and College Readiness Program. One of the students who was in that class, Chris Dang, got inspired, I think, by some of the work that we were doing and decided he was going to do an advanced placement research project at Walter Payton, where he was a student in CPS. And he did a study using some of the data that we've gathered across the city and some of the data that he also gathered through doing his own deployments to understand how internet access varied in CPS schools in different parts of the city, north, south, and west sides. Chris, I should mention, not only did this project, but as a result, got really into computer science, and now he's a first year at the University of Chicago. He matriculated this past fall, first generation college student. Yep. The initiative has also had a number of other outreach activities, including open source software packages, as well as engagement directly with the city, including on the Digital Equity Coalition. There's a couple of transitions to practice that I'll briefly mention. One is there's the $43 billion, part of the $60 billion being invested as part of the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment process from the federal government. Communities can challenge what the Federal Communications Commission says about what internet access looks like in those regions. And part of that process requires people to basically gather data about their internet connectivity and submit data to say, no, actually what the FCC thinks about internet connectivity in our region is not actually the reality. As part of the initiative here, we've built a site called beadchallenge.org. You can go home and help your community by taking speed tests at beadchallenge.org, and if they're not up to snuff, submitting those to our local government to perhaps help get your community better internet access. There's also another transition to practice, which is a lot of the technology that's been developed in this initiative has now become part of a commercial venture called Net Microscope. That was, I don't know if, I think Polsky is here, but that was actually something that went through the Polsky Center, through the I-Corps program, through the Compass Accelerator, and then ultimately through the George Shultz Innovation Fund. And I should say that we're hiring. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick, for taking us back to school, for telling us how to clean messy data. But I have to say, some of us are really upset because the speed I'm getting in this room is 1/5 of what I get in Hyde Park. So now I need to go and call T-Mobile. Some of you have the same experience. There is a lot of trauma in the room now, but let's move on. So I'd like to introduce the next speaker, David Uminsky. David joined the university in September 2020 as the executive director of the Data Science Institute. Before joining us, he was an associate professor of mathematics and executive director of the Data Science Institute at the University of San Francisco, where he was also the founding director of their undergraduate programs in data science. Now, as the executive director of the DSI, David oversees all activities, programs, and partnerships, both within and beyond the university. David?
Good evening, everyone. All right, make sure this works. It's really inspiring for me to hear from both my faculty and interact before the presentation began, and I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you after around this topic. I have to say I've devoted exclusively most of my career that wasn't spent proving theorems in mathematics on this particular problem of data science. Today, I'm going to talk about the parts of our institute that are focused on our impact and outreach in the community. But what I want to say is what you heard already is that work. Our research done at the DSI and at the University of Chicago drives everything we do. We have world-class faculty. You've heard from 2. You're going to see a preview of many more. There's more in your booklet. But every one of these incredible people come and bring what they know to work every day so that we can drive the impact in Chicago. What we just heard is a research integration of our core research with our community. Imagine faculty that sit with the mayor's office and talk about hard problems. Now think about what Becca was doing in AI and science, bringing the university's bearing and leadership and driving impact and investment into Chicago itself. The Chan Zuckerberg BioHub, the NITMB, this is just the beginning of what Chicago's leadership it means to the impact of Chicago itself and greater Chicagoland. Dan just said and outed me that I'm new to Chicago. I moved here during the pandemic. I was convinced over a Zoom call that I should just pick up and leave sunny California and move here and hope this is a good decision for me and my 2 girls, right, and my wife. So it turned out it was one of the easy decisions I could have made. And part of the reason why it was so easy is the work that we build around what we do. I want to tell you just about one partnership. One of these partnerships I'm most proud of and we've been working for so long with, and that's with the City Colleges of Chicago. I'll say CCC from here. So what you see up here is an opportunity that could have only been led by the University of Chicago, but only could have had impact in partnership. When I had to take a call, it was 2021, first year on the job, it was a call over Zoom. A lot of you Chicago folks, a lot of folks from the city colleges, and really quickly we learned about an opportunity, but also a risk. And that risk was there's 7,000 undergraduates at the University of Chicago that are going to get the state-of-the-art access to education and research in AI and data science. But there's 70 to 100,000 more students in the city colleges that did not have that access. And for us, it was an incredible opportunity to understand, do our ideas translate? Does our core concept, our mission, our vision have impact where it matters in our community? So right away, faculty from both institutions began collaborating on understanding what was possible at the city colleges. Very early on, we hit one barrier. That barrier was, and depending on your workforce, it's really hard to recruit top-flight teaching faculty in the area of AI and data science. Experts in general in this field are hard to come by. It's a new field. So what did we decide to do? We didn't throw our hands up and give up. We decided, let's roll up our sleeves, work together, and let's build that workforce together. So we began a program called the Preceptorship Program, an idea of bringing fresh, new PhDs, graduates from all across the nation, to the University of Chicago and CCC to develop that field of researchers, scholars, and teachers that know the very best techniques in teaching in the city colleges as well as the University of Chicago. That was the idea. You see up here a quote from the chancellor of CCC that I think summarizes best. Often when you see a partnership between a place like the University of Chicago with a storied history, a prestige, a place in the world, partnering with a place like the city colleges, it is not mutually beneficial. It is not always bidirectional, and it is not always without extractive practice. When we put those things on the table, we build new things that build capacity for both our institutions. One of the things I didn't tell you, it was also hard for the University of Chicago to recruit top-flight teaching faculty. So here we are now, 18 months into this partnership. We've got 5 preceptors. I'm going to show you their beautiful faces next slide. We have over 600 students and growing that have been taught in this program, both at the city colleges and the University of Chicago, across 4 of the 7 campuses. We've also now began to attract the first research funding from the NSF, because the NSF was wondering, how did you even develop this model of interaction? How did this partnership even begin? And that's what we're studying there. We have a lot to do, and right there I have a lot of credit to give right now to Walter, to our good friend Massey, who has been a steward of both the University of Chicago as well as the city colleges that really was our support when the going got tough. These aren't as easy to stand up when we got going. So as a result of this, though, that was one partnership. That partnership resulted in a conversation that expanded way outside of that, is what else can we do as a city? And that was very easy to come up with. Every university that we began having conversation with said, I also want to talk about what is the Chicago strategy for data science and AI. And right now, we've now convened at the University of Chicago 50+ faculty across these universities thinking about things like transfer pathways, thinking about the curriculum that we're developing at this university and how curriculum like it serve their students. Those faculty know how to serve their students best. We know how to serve ours best. And it is the conversation and the partnership across the entire city that gets me really excited about impact. Now we're talking about lots of students. And we're talking about a vision that has sustainability and capacity building from the beginning. This is exciting for me. One of the things I really want to talk about in all this process is really our partnership with industry and workforce. Many of you have come back to this room and have come back to the university from a place high up in industry. I am very grateful for the partnerships we've had already. Morningstar has been an incredible partner, Invenergy, many other partners you'll hear about in just a few moments from my faculty leader, Mike Franklin, around this. They provide opportunities for our students to grow, to thrive, and to contribute to what the core frontier of data science and AI looks like in industry. And it's impacting all of these institutions. For me, that's really fun. And it's a reason to get up every day. But what I thought I would end with here is actually, well, I guess I have one more slide. I said I would end. Regionally, I like what we're doing. But very early on, it was clear University of Chicago occupies a global leadership position. And right away, very early on, we thought about what is our national network of impact can be as we build our research, as we build our education programs. And we decided intentionally to build a new network with places with their own storied history that looks similar to ours in some ways and different in other ways. Places like Morehouse College, places like Howard, places like UTSA and Fresno State, 2 of the 5 largest Hispanic-serving institutions in the entire country. We convened faculty across the grant supported by Rockefeller Foundation and MasterCard to think hard about how do we think about social impact data science? How do we do research in it? How do we think about education programs in it? And after these 8 institutions convened for the last 2 years, many new degrees, many new programs, and hundreds upon hundreds of students have now been engaged. My favorite here, of course, and I'm very proud of this because I was around this summer, was the culminating experience this summer was bringing students from all of these institutions, along with our UChicago undergrads, to work on research, hard research problems in applied and social impact data science, in the environment, in human rights, in ocean health. And for me, when they were finished that work, they said in their exit survey, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I was like, well, welcome to the University of Chicago. The other thing I would say about it was as soon as they were done, blood, sweat, and tears, they went out and talked about their work. They talked about the research at conferences. And half of those projects have already run best awards at those conferences based on that work. So I'm very proud about what's going on, and it's just at the beginning. I'm going to end, though, with this is what I meant to end with, is not a story about big programs and big ambitions, but about one person. Because I think it's really hard to talk and understand what it means to do data science at a national scale or a regional scale or even a city scale. So let's just think about one person. One of the most important areas that we started very early on thinking about is the actual way to get into this field. We heard from the city colleges saying they're worried about their students being overlooked in this opportunity, and we rose to the occasion. Before you get to the community colleges and before you get to the University of Chicago or any of those other institutions of higher ed, you are first a high school student, which we all were, however much we liked it. And so if we don't go into our community, into our high schools, and show them what the potential is, what the future is of this field, and encourage them that they belong, that they should be there, and they should engage, then we've missed another opportunity. For the last 2.5 years, we've had a program called Data for All. It has served, by and large, CPS students from the south and west side, but all across Chicago as well. Students now with hundreds of applications per semester, we let in 20 or 30. They come, they spend 3 to 4 hours on a Saturday here at the University of Chicago, and we are teaching them data science, science and reasoning, how to think about code, how to think about algorithms, how to make impact. It's project-based, so the students know when they're done, they know how to make impact. And one of those students that was in the very first of those cohorts is a student by the name of Jaleel. He went to Kenwood Academy, and that's a block and a half from my house. He went to the first class of Data for All, which unfortunately was on Zoom, because that was also what we did during that time. And Jaleel, sometimes, he wasn't sure he wanted to be there, and he wasn't sure that this was the program for him. But through a lot of intention and good practice, we hooked him. He got really excited. He applied directly to our summer lab program, which includes high school students. This is an applied research program where you come in, work with faculty, and solve a hard research problem in data science and AI. And we let in high school students in this program. So if you have a high schooler, I welcome you to apply for the summer after next. The applications are closed now. And Jaleel applied. He got in, he contributed, he solved one of the hardest problems that we had that year in computer vision. He was the first order contributor to that problem. And the story I would have liked to tell you is he came to the University of Chicago right afterwards. That's the part I'm missing. I think there was some familiar pressure from parents about going to Michigan instead, but it wasn't because he didn't get into the University of Chicago. I'm very proud of stories like this. I want you to know there are hundreds of students like this right now that the University of Chicago is thinking about making an impact on, and we're going to need your help to do that. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for that incredible story on our partnerships. To provide closing remarks and moderate our Q&A session, I'd like to invite my fellow faculty co-director, Mike Franklin. Mike is a leading researcher in large-scale data management system. He is the Morton D. Hull Distinguished Service Professor for the Department of Computer Science and Senior Advisor to the Provost for Computing and Data Science. Mike.
Okay. Oh, you forgot this part. Then you wouldn't have had to list all the titles. Okay, great. So I hope you've gotten the idea that we're at a really exciting and unique time where technology is just plowing ahead. Things that seemed like just crazy dreams just a few years ago now seem very possible. And that's having tremendous impact, as you've heard from the various faculty, really across everything we do at the university, whether it's research, education, outreach, and so on, but really all across society. So we've talked about the history and a little bit of the context of the Data Science Institute. And before opening up the floor to questions, which we'll do in just a couple of minutes, so think of your questions, I just want to take a couple minutes to look forward a little bit, tell you where we see things going. So I think the best way to give you a feel for the momentum we have and the ambitions that we have is to talk about three different things. Faculty hiring, which we've been incredibly successful at, our plans for research going forward, and a little bit more about partnerships. So let's talk about faculty. So we've been on a hiring tear. As has been mentioned several times, it's really, really hard to find people with expertise in AI and data science at all in the world, and to find ones that are willing to take the pay cut that one would have to take, even at a well-funded institution, to be an academic rather than going to industry, makes that pool even smaller. And I'm really happy to say that we've hired really one of the best young groups of AI and data science faculty anywhere in the country. And so these people that we've hired over the past few years come from really leading places in the country, whether it's MIT or Berkeley or, dare I say, Stanford or Carnegie Mellon. They've worked, and some of them still are working, at companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, and so on. And some of them are active and successful entrepreneurs as well. And they're bringing their experience and their entrepreneurial expertise to the Chicago ecosystem. So some of the areas that these people are working in, and if you're interested in any of these, I'd be happy to tell you afterwards, who to talk to. But human-centered and trustworthy AI, we've heard a little bit about that during the evening. Large language models, things like ChatGPT, why they work, how to improve them, when you can't trust them, and so on. Scalable data management systems, my favorite topic. Distributed and federated learning for doing AI kind of across large networks, similar to some of the things Nick was talking about. Economics of data, right? Data is an incredible resource, right? It's the new oil. So what are the rules of that economy? How do you build viable data markets? And of course, as Becca mentioned, what are the theoretical underpinnings of data science and AI, and how do you use that to build all these things on top of? So they've done a lot. You've heard some of the accomplishments already. I'll just mention a couple that you haven't heard about. Recently, a group at UChicago released a couple of tools. One is called Glaze, the other is called Nightshade. And what these tools do is they help artists protect their work from being appropriated or misappropriated by generative AI without their permission. So these tools have been released as open source software. They've been downloaded in the last few months over 2.2 million times. They've received coverage in all the major media outlets, and have really started a debate in the UChicago fashion of what are acceptable defenses for people like artists in this world where there are companies that are trying to use their creative output and not necessarily giving them credit or compensation for it. And so this is a project that I think you'll hear more and more about in the future. I think the other one I'll mention is some work that one of our faculty, Elaine, who's up in the top left there, has done, where he's basically shown fundamental flaws in algorithms that many, many companies and people are using to de-identify data, right? So to make data private, in order to meet the requirements of data privacy mandates in the European Union and really across the world. And he's shown fundamental reasons why these approaches that people are using don't work and will never work. And again, this is a very UChicago type of a project where we're getting at the theoretical underpinnings of a really important practical problem. So that's a little bit about our faculty. And again, if you want to hear more about any of those topics, we're happy to discuss those. In terms of research, you've heard about our ongoing research initiatives in AI and science, in internet equity. Dan mentioned briefly our work on data and democracy with the Harris School of Public Policy and the Political Science Department, which is looking at things as you'd expect of misinformation, disinformation, as well as trying to understand how to use data to enable governments to better serve their constituents. But maybe more exciting and more future-looking is we recently put out a call for proposals across the campus for people that want to start new interdisciplinary research initiatives. We got 9 proposals that you can see there in areas like AI for climate, AI for medicine, human-centered AI, and so on. And we're in the process now of reviewing those. Based on the amount of funding we have, we will we'll award some number of these to try to get these projects going and get these interdisciplinary teams, people from very different parts of campus, faculty, students, researchers, all working together on these important societal problems. Finally, I just want to mention, in terms of partnership, one of the partnerships we haven't said too much about so far is our industrial engagement. We strongly believe that in order for our work and the work of our students to have real impact in the world and in the Chicago area, we need to be engaging very closely with leading companies. And so we have a number of initiatives, as you imagine, just projects, that are individual faculty doing sponsored research or joint projects with companies. But we have 2 other things I just wanted to bring to your attention. One is our industrial affiliate program, which is built to connect people from companies, mostly in the Midwest, but more broadly than that, with the excellent work that you've been hearing about that's going on in the data science, to make those connections, to build networks, to facilitate the exchange of ideas between the university and what's going on in the commercial world. And you can see the companies that are currently involved in that. So this is something, if you're involved in a local company and you're interested in it, please talk with us. And then I'll just mention briefly, we've created something called the Transform Accelerator, jointly with the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship on campus. And what Transform is it's a 16-week program. Companies from all over the world can apply. They get to work with UChicago experts and other business experts from around the Chicago area, and they get training on how to take their ideas or their initial prototypes and go down the process of turning that into a company. Now, Transform itself is a startup. We just graduated our 2nd cohort. And one of those companies, a company called Echo Labs, recently, it was just in the news, closed what is being called the largest pre-seed round ever in Chicago history. It was some $8 million or something like that. So, and we taught them everything they know. No, not really. We're currently in the process of reviewing applications for cohort 3. And I think you'll be seeing more and more interesting and exciting companies coming out of this program. So with that, I hope we gave you an idea of where we see things going and how we got to where we are today. And what I'd like to do now, I know you all have a lot of questions about data and AI, so I'd like to invite my faculty colleagues up to the stage and open the floor to questions. So faculty colleagues. Okay, so who would like to ask a question of our experts? In the back, I see somebody.
Hi. My name is Alexis, and I am the director of the Internet Equity Initiative. Thank you all for your very quick lightning talks. Having been at University of Texas and then at University of Michigan before this, I had this bias that private school would not have applied research like a public school would. And since coming here, I've been completely surprised with the depth and breadth of applications, and not only that, but inclusion of students. And so I'm curious, now that we're in the Q&A, if you guys could share your favorite example of how you see applied research and the University of Chicago Data Science Institute integrating with each other. One of the things that I've observed is this giant gap between what is expected of modern corporations, governments, and nonprofits, and a lack of expertise. And so borrowing expertise and training people up on that expertise, I think that's where we're going. So I would love to hear what you guys have to say about that. Thank you.
I'm going to let you guys self-organize.
Oh, good. I'm going to turn on my mic. I don't mind going first. I think I have the pleasure or the pain of, so I've really enjoyed setting up this clinic project, this experiential learning piece, where students go and then they take all 3 or 4 years, and if you're an undergrad, you know, of deep theory, rigorous study, intense systems education, and go try to solve a problem. So we now have integrated in all of education this opportunity. In terms of really real-world applied impact, I'm fortunate enough to be the faculty mentor of the project we do with Morningstar right now in this process. And there we've had a team of students working the state-of-the-art of what's known about generative AI, large language models, and understanding how those skills and new breakthroughs actually have application in industry. I won't tell you the punchline yet, but it turns out there's a lot to do there. And what I'm excited about is having partners like Morningstar really interested in actually authoring research around this. So right now we have a paper under review of the work that's jointly authored by our students, our researchers, and researchers at Morningstar now on that work. And so I can't think of a better example of marrying those two things as closely as possible for everyone's benefit.
Anyone else need to jump in? No, I don't feel obligated.
I'm happy to follow.
Yeah, in my experience, the students at UChicago are deeply interested in applications and deeply interested in doing research that's going to better society. Many of my students are super interested in understanding how we can use AI to improve climate science because they're very concerned about their futures. Not only their futures, but the futures of their families and communities. And so I think the kinds of things that we're doing in the Data Science Institute and the impact on society is extremely attractive to students.
Great.
I think one of the things that really had a big impression on me about 10 years ago was a keynote that one of my colleagues gave, and he's at a conference in my field where he said, there really does not need to be a tension between deep scholarship and affecting the practice. And that really had an impact on me. And I think what I try to basically impart to students and what I see is really imbued in the research that I see at UChicago is that the work doesn't end with scholarly publication. The work, in many cases, that's the start, right? That's how we start affecting the practice. And I think I can't pick just one example because I think everything we heard tonight embodies that, is the deep scholarship and affecting the practice through policy, through clinic, through entrepreneurship. Yeah, I think we heard many, many examples of that.
Great. Any next question? Doesn't have to be about what we were pitching. I mean, really anything you're interested in about AI or whatever. Yeah.
I noticed that you didn't list the law school in the list of, cross-team collaborations. I would have thought that like the large language models and the U of C Law School, I thought would be a natural collaborative fit, and I'm wondering whether that was whether there is any interaction there going on.
I can speak to that. In the Data and Democracy Initiative that Mike talked about, there's some collaboration with the law school, particularly in the area of content moderation. So Mike spoke for a minute about things like misinformation, disinformation, which I guess we'll probably hear a lot more about this election year. But one of the topics that comes up there, as I know we've all sort of experienced, is how do platforms that host content make decisions about what content gets to stay, what doesn't get to stay, or what are the other dispositions for that content and the users who decide to post them. And as it turns out, it's kind of the Wild West, but it also varies. And there's an intersection with the law there, right? Because if we talk about things like copyright, right? There's a lot of legal doctrine on copyright in this country, the DMCA, et cetera, et cetera. Now you go to something like disinformation, less so, right? And there's some very interesting work that's going on in the Data and Democracy Initiative to look at basically how different content platforms articulate, organize, and also enforce those policies, and how those differences sort of intersect with legal precedent or lack thereof in many cases. So that's one example. But I think many of the faculty that Mike listed on his slide, Lonnie Cohen, I know teaches jointly with the law professor in the law school, Lior Strahilovitz, a course on privacy. Chen Hao Tan as well.
I think the work I mentioned from Eloni was actually done with colleagues from the law school.
Yeah, so that work that there was that work. The work that I was just talking about was a collaboration with Genevieve Lakier, who's a First Amendment scholar. So Lior Strahilovitz, Genevieve Lakier. Jonathan Masur also has been involved in some of the work on copyright and generative AI. We've filed some comments to the USPTO on that. So there's a bunch of crossover to the law school.
Right.
Yeah,
we also spent a lot of time talking to the Office of Legal Counsel before the Nightshade program was released, because what that does is if you train your model on it, it poisons your model so it doesn't work on other content.
Yeah.
But I do think this is an area that's just really ripe with potential. And I think the example that Mike mentioned earlier with Eloni is a perfect example, right? There are existing privacy laws, HIPAA in the United States for healthcare law, or GDPR in the European Union. And he said, hey, what does this actually mean in practice if we try to enforce these laws? And it turned out that the common legal standards do not protect people's privacy. And I think that just illustrates that some of the risks that we face if we start thinking about designing regulations or certifications for AI systems without really having people with a deep technical knowledge intimately involved from the very beginning. And so because of that, I think your question is perfect. Like, there's a lot of opportunity for interactions and collaborations there.
Question? This one right here.
Hello. I was wondering, many AI programs use aggregate of past research for their programs, which inevitably contain biases towards race and gender. How does University of Chicago's Data Science Institute combat this in their AI programs?
So certainly in our education programs, which David and Dan highlighted, this is covered. We give many examples about, not just what the methods are, but the ways in which they might be misused. And I think that, it's more complex than someone might initially think, right? I think some people might say, oh, as long as I have a sufficiently diverse data set, I'm fine, problem solved. And that's not the case at all, right? There have been a number of problems identified with data sets like ImageNet, which has been widely used to train a lot of the modern computer vision tools. that were just sort of hidden under the hood, right? But once you start diving deep, you see like major problems, like, you know, a woman just sitting on the beach, and one of the labels that we're using to train these image recognition systems is like kleptomaniac. You know, just totally inappropriate. But, you know, also, I'll just highlight the work of our colleague at the Booth School, Sindel Mulanathan, who is looking at an AI-powered system used in healthcare context, where what they wanted to do was predict, you know, how much healthcare needs people had. And they had a really diverse pool of patients that they trained this on. So problem solved, right? And then what he showed was, in fact, that the resulting system was extremely biased. And what happened was that the people who were developing this said, well, I don't know how to measure healthcare needs, so what I'm going to measure instead is healthcare expenditures. But if you know something about healthcare in the United States, you know that expenditures are not needs, and the correlation between them varies a lot across different socioeconomic and ethnic and racial groups. And so by making this sort of design decision about how they were going to set up their training, they inadvertently put a lot of bias into this system. And so I think, you know, thinking carefully about these case studies, highlighting them in our classes, when we have reading groups within our research labs, going into the details about what caused these problems and making sure that we're not repeating the mistakes of the past, is just integral to everything that we're doing here at UChicago.
And I should add that we do this from the first class that students take in data science. In the first class we do, I show them an example of a machine learning algorithm that can predict age based on molecular data, and they get very excited because they have this tool, and they say, wow, I can look and sort of try to predict my age or my biological age based on that. And I tell them the story on how this is used in Germany, for example, to predict the age of immigrants. And then slowly I let the students destroy that example by finding the faults in using a model that's trained on Californians to be used on immigrants from Middle East in Germany, and the impact that has on practice. There are legal aspects, policy aspects of it. So that's from the first class they take.
Great. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Anyone want to ask the last question?
Oh, yeah?
All right, great.
Last one.
Exciting that what's going on and moving to impact, and certainly impact through, I think through this evening, I heard about 2 startups. So I need to come talk to you and learn about a few more. But so I would imagine that creates some tension, because now we have very creative faculty starting companies, maybe wanting to go work on moving that effort forward. How are you managing that, or what kinds of policies are you putting in place at the university to help facilitate that?
You can take that.
Panelists? Oh, yeah. I get David, you're involved in
Let me
some
take the
discussions.
easy one, which is our students,
Yeah.
right? I think the students are our future. Sometimes we think we all want them to become faculty at MIT or UChicago, but we know, in fact, looking in this room, that there's many measures of success. So when it comes to the student ideas, they own their IP, they think about what they want to work on. And we actually have built things like Transform, and through the Polsky Innovation Center and the culture itself, to incentivize and support them. You know, when I went to some schools where you didn't want to tell your faculty you wanted to go to industry. And that was something you did after you graduated, you know, because they thought you were going to be a postdoc and go on and be a researcher. And I'm very proud to say that there's a much more holistic approach to this field and what we're doing. And I think it comes a little bit from the nature of the work we're doing. The line to impact is so short. You can really have a great idea and in 6 months go get funded, or less, 16 weeks. And so for us on the student side, our graduate students, even our postdocs, I want to build a culture that incentivizes translation and impact broadly through entrepreneurship and partnership. I think with our faculty, it's a bit of a challenge because we actually want Nick to launch this company and others, and we have great examples of this type of behavior happening that has great impact for the world and for our students and for our research. But I think, you know, it's a complex question of, like, if it's so successful, will they come back? And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions even at the highest levels of the university about how do we be more open to this, because in this field, that's where innovation happens at that intersection between great new ideas and putting them out in the world. So one thing I didn't mention, but one of the faculty that was on that list that we hired, I talked about this big pre-seed round in Chicago. Well, he founded a company out on the West Coast that just closed $105 million Series A. And now we've got to convince them to come back and teach a class. So we're living this, and the good news is that the university is looking at this as an opportunity and trying to figure out ways to make it work. So great. So with that, I think I just want to thank everybody for coming. I hope we shared our excitement and what we're doing and the importance of partnership and your support. We have a reception in the room where we were before the program started, and so please join us, and all the speakers will be there, and we look forward to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.